Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Today marks President Obama's last full day in office. On Friday at noon, Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts will swear in Donald Trump as the country's 45th president. On Wednesday, Obama gave his last press conference as president, during which he warned Trump he will not stay silent if he sees what he called the nation's core values at risk. Obama also thanked the press and spoke about the role they've played during his presidency.
Having you in this building has made this place work better. It keeps us honest. It makes us work harder. You have made us think about how we are doing what we do and whether or not we're able to deliver on what's been requested by our constituents.
The incoming Trump administration has proposed moving the press corps out of the White House and instead relocating them nearby to the old executive office building. Trump had to back away from the proposal on Wednesday after outrage amongst members of the press and those concerned about press freedoms. During President Obama's final news conference Wednesday, he also spoke about his recent decision to commute Army whistleblower Chelsea Manning's sentence.
It has been my view that given she went to trial, that due process was carried out, that she took responsibility for her crime, that the sentence that she received was very disproportionate relative to what other leakers had received.
Also on Wednesday, the Office of the Pardon Attorney has announced President Obama has denied clemency to imprisoned Native American activist Leonard Peltier. Peltier is a former member of the American Indian Movement who was convicted of killing 2 FBI agents during a shootout on South Dakota's Pine Ridge Reservation in 1975. He's long maintained his innocence. Amnesty International condemned the decision, saying, quote, "We are deeply saddened by the news that President Obama will not let Leonard go home." We'll have more on President Obama's speech and legacy after headlines with Professors Eddie Glaude and Rashid Khalidi. Scientists with both NASA and NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, have confirmed 2016 was the hottest year on record, topping the previous record set in 2015, which topped the previous record only a year earlier. This marks the first time in recorded human history the Earth has smashed temperature records 3 straight years in a row. Scientists with the U.S. National Snow and Ice Data Center have also announced global sea ice levels are at their lowest point in recorded human history. The unprecedented warming of the planet due to human-caused climate change comes as Oklahoma Attorney General Scott Pruitt underwent his confirmation hearing to be head of the Environmental Protection Agency. Pruitt has long denied the overwhelming scientific consensus on climate change. Dozens of people protested outside his hearing. At least 3 were arrested, including Lakota water protector Joanne Spotted Bear, who was arrested while in prayer. This is Scott Pruitt being questioned by Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders.
So you are applying for a job as administrator for the EPA to protect our environment. Overwhelming majority of scientists say we have got to act boldly, and you're telling me that there needs to be more debate on this issue. I'm asking your personal opinion.
My personal opinion is immaterial.
Really?
To the job of
you are going to be the head of the agency to protect the environment, and your personal feelings about whether climate change is caused by human activity and carbon emissions is immaterial?
Senator, I've acknowledged to you that the human activity impacts the climate.
Impacts. If that's the kind of EPA administrator you will be, you're not going to get my vote.
We'll have more on Pruitt's confirmation hearing later in the broadcast. Georgia Congressman Tom Price also underwent his Senate confirmation hearing to head the Health and Human Services Administration. Price is one of the leading opponents of President Obama's Affordable Care Act. He supports privatizing Medicare, opposes abortion, and has voted to cut all federal funding for Planned Parenthood. His hearing came only days after CNN reported Price invested thousands of dollars in the medical device maker Zimmer Biomet shortly before introducing a bill to benefit the company. Price's legislation sought to delay regulations that would have changed the way Medicare pays for hip and knee replacements, thereby cutting into Zimmer Biomet's profits. We'll have more on Congressman Tom Price's confirmation hearing later in the broadcast. Confirmation hearings were also held Wednesday for billionaire Wilbur Ross, Trump's pick for Commerce Secretary. Ross is worth an estimated $2.9 billion. If confirmed, he'll be one of the richest people to ever hold public office. During the hearing, Ross admitted he has recently fired an undocumented immigrant who'd been working in his home since 2009 after rechecking his household employees' documentation status. South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley also had her confirmation hearing to serve as U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. During her hearing, she criticized the UN for what she claimed was its bias against Israel, and she said she supports Trump's plan to move the U.S. embassy in Israel from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, a proposal which has outraged Palestinians and much of the world community. More confirmation hearings are slated to take place today, including for former Texas Governor Rick Perry, who Trump tapped to head the Energy Department. Governor Perry famously attempted to abolish the Energy Department, but then couldn't remember the name of the agency during a live televised debate in 2011 when Perry was running for president. Former Goldman Sachs executive Steven Mnuchin will also have his confirmation hearing for Treasury Secretary today. Mnuchin has faced criticism for his role at OneWest, a bank which has been called a foreclosure machine that profited from the collapse of the housing market. On Wednesday, homeowners who face foreclosure by OneWest or its subsidiaries testified at a meeting held by Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren. This is 84-year-old Colleen Eisen-Hudroff, who took out a reverse loan with the OneWest subsidiary Financial Freedom in 2006 on the home she and her husband Monroe had been living in since 1963.
My husband Monroe passed on September 12, 2014. A mere 10 days later, despite what we had been told, Financial Freedom contacted me and told me that I needed to pay off the loan immediately. This was news to me. I was in no financial position to do so. Since then, Financial Freedom has been trying to foreclose on me. I think this is an injustice in that an elderly woman was deceived, and now Financial Freedom is trying to take my home. I hear that Steve Mnuchin was a leader of the bank that is doing this to me and other seniors. I do not think a man like that should be the Treasury Secretary and in charge of our economy.
That's Colleen Eisen-Hudroff speaking about her fight to save her home from foreclosure by a subsidiary of OneWest, Steven Mnuchin's bank. Two organizations have filed a complaint with the Department of Housing and Urban Development, accusing OneWest of discriminating against people of color by refusing to make loans to African Americans, Asian Americans, and Latinos while Mnuchin was in charge of the bank. Ahead of today's hearing, Mnuchin submitted a revised questionnaire which reveals he's the director of investment fund Dune Capital International Limited, which is incorporated in the tax haven, the Cayman Islands. He also admitted he's management posts in 7 other funds, which he claims he inadvertently failed to include on his first questionnaire. Donald Trump has announced he's nominated former Georgia Governor Sonny Perdue to be Secretary of Agriculture. Perdue ran a grain and fertilizer business before becoming Georgia's first Republican governor since Reconstruction. Environmental activists have slammed Perdue for receiving hundreds of thousands of dollars in subsidies for chemical corporations and factory farming. The Environmental Working Group said, quote, "It's certainly hard to imagine that a former fertilizer salesman will tackle the unregulated farm pollution that poisons our drinking water, turns Lake Erie green, and fouls the Chesapeake Bay and the Gulf of Mexico," unquote. With Perdue's nomination, Trump has now named all his cabinet choices. They're overwhelmingly white male millionaires or billionaires. If all his picks are confirmed, Trump's cabinet will be the first without a Latino member since 1988. More controversies are surfacing about some of Trump's other choices for top positions. The Washington Post reports South Carolina Republican Congressman Mick Mulvaney did not pay $15,000 in taxes for a household worker from 2000 to 2004. Meanwhile, the New York Times reports billionaire Wall Street investor Vincent Viola, whom Trump has tapped to be Army Secretary, was accused this past summer of punching a concessions worker in the face at a racehorse auction in Saratoga Springs, New York. Hundreds of people danced the night away Wednesday at a queer dance party outside Vice President-elect Mike Pence's rental home in Chevy Chase, Maryland. The dance party was a protest against the former Indiana governor's long history of pushing extreme anti-LGBTQ legislation. Pence has opposed marriage equality and anti-discrimination laws to protect LGBTQ people. Native Americans and their allies fighting the $3.8 billion Dakota Access Pipeline have scored a series of legal victories. The North Dakota Supreme Court partially granted a petition that'll open the door for out-of-state lawyers to represent the more than 600 people who've been arrested amidst the ongoing resistance. Also Wednesday, a federal judge rejected an attempt by the Dakota Access Pipeline Company Energy Transfer Partners to block the Army Corps of Engineers from beginning a lengthy environmental impact statement on the section of the pipeline slated to cross the Missouri River. The ruling means the environmental impact study will now move forward, indefinitely halting construction of the pipeline. The legal victories came only hours before, late Wednesday night, water protectors say police deployed tear gas and rubber bullets against Native Americans trying to erect a teepee on Backwater Bridge, a site of frequent police attacks. In more pipeline news, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police say more than $500,000 of damage was caused after people sabotaged an oil pipeline under construction in northern Alberta. Authorities say people used heavy machinery to dig up a section of the contested pipeline. In Africa, West African troops are amassing at Gambia's border, poised to intervene if President Yahya Jammeh does not relinquish power today. Incoming President Adama Barrow won December's elections, but Jammeh has so far refused to step down. He's been in power since 1994 and once vowed to rule for 1 billion years. The United Nations say more than 25,000 people have fled Gambia to neighboring Senegal amidst the rising tensions. Back in the United States, former President George H.W. Bush and his wife Barbara are both hospitalized in Houston. The 92-year-old former president is in stable condition after experiencing respiratory problems stemming from pneumonia. He's currently the oldest living U.S. president. Barbara Bush was hospitalized for fatigue and coughing. In Indiana, Republican legislators have sparked outrage after introducing a bill that would empower police to remove protesters blocking traffic using any means necessary. Organizers and activists opposed to the legislation have dubbed it the, quote, block traffic and you die bill, unquote. The bill is being pushed by Indiana Republican Senator Jim Tomes, who has previously pushed other controversial proposals, including one to jail transgender people for using public bathrooms that match their gender identity. In financial news, JPMorgan Chase will pay $55 million to settle a lawsuit with the Justice Department accusing the bank of discriminating against more than 50,000 homeowners of color between 2006 and 2009. The lawsuit accuses JPMorgan Chase of violating the Fair Housing Act and Equal Credit Opportunity Act. As part of the settlement, JPMorgan Chase does not have to admit wrongdoing, and no bankers are facing criminal charges. And in Colombia, human rights defenders Emilson Manyoma and her husband, Joe Javier Rodallega, have been assassinated. Manyoma was a leader in the Bajo Calima's human rights organization, has been documenting human rights violations in the region. She first began organizing against the paramilitary control of the region in 2005. She and her husband reportedly received a series of threats in the days leading up to their murders. Last week, 3 other human rights defenders were killed in Colombia. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.